Hi everybody, welcome back to the Leonardo the Lion finishing tutorial series. Today we're going to be sewing on, well, we're going to be cutting out and sewing on Leo's eyelids and nose. So I'm just gonna show you what I have done so far. So I pre-knit the felted swatch per the instructions, per her finishing instructions. So I made the 2-color swatch and I tossed it in the washing machine with my sheets the last time I washed my sheets, and I actually put it in the dryer too. So as you can see, basically all of the stitch definition is gone now in comparison to what it looks like knit up. So there's it knit without being felted. Here it is felted. So what I've done is I cut out my little template pieces from my pattern and I pinned them down to my fabric like so, and traced around them. And I couldn't find my fabric pen, so I actually ended up just using kind of like a Sharpie, fine tip Sharpie, because you're not going to see the outline. So yeah, so I just pin this down using T-pins and traced around the edges to give me a cutting line. And thank you to my sewer friends who suggested that I do this instead of trying to cut around a piece of paper. It's much more effective. So cut these out from your pattern. I recommend, if you're working from the print pattern, to print out the digital, like the page that this is on in the digital pattern, and just cut it out from computer paper. Just so you don't have to cut into your pretty printed pattern. But if that's all you have, then that's cool too. But just know that you're probably going to be cutting into the information that's on the back. If you don't, I did a double-sided printout for this, which is why my chart is cut into here. So yeah, so just keep that in mind when you're cutting out these little pattern templates. So what I also have here is my black sewing thread and a needle, which I used to sew on his eyes earlier. And that's pretty much all we need to do. And all you need to do is, after you make your felted swatch, just let's go ahead and cut out these pieces. So if you have a pair of fabric scissors, this would be the time to grab those. If not, a nice sharp pair of kitchen shears would work really well. Right now, all I have up here are these guys, which I'm sure will work fine. They're pretty sharp. So let's come back after I finish cutting these out. Okay, we're back. So here are all of the pieces cut out, and as you can see, they're all fused and felted together. So when I cut them, nothing is unraveling or falling apart because the fibers have fused. So my next step, I already threaded my my sewing needle with black thread. And if you watch my button video, the last video for sewing on his eyes, then you know that that I doubled my strands of sewing thread to sew on the buttons, but for this one I'm just using a single strand with a knot at the end, because I don't want the double strand to bunch up on me, and I also want the sewing thread to be as fine as possible when I'm sewing on his eyelids and his nose. So let's take a look at him here. So here he is with his very surprised expression. And let's start off by figuring out where this is gonna go. So I think I'm gonna start with his nose actually. So I'm gonna set off his eyelids off to the side for right now. And start figuring out where I want his little nose to go. So my recommendation is to consult the photos as always and decide where you like your nose best. So this is the right side of the fabric, which is the side that I would like to show. You can choose to show the right side of the wrong side of the fabric, which is the reverse stockinette side if you prefer. There really isn't very much stitch definition on either side, so it doesn't really matter all that much. But go ahead and decide where you want his little nose to go. And you can even pin it on if you want. Like so. So to start sewing on, this is going to be a pretty easy whip stitch. And the first thing that I'm going to do is go find my starting point, which is for me going to be the tip of his nose. And my little knot is stopping me from pulling the thread all the way through the fabric. And then going down into catching a stitch from his face, from his little head, and going up through the fabric. So whip stitch is kind of like one of those terms that's exactly what it sounds like. You're just kind of going around, whipping around the edges. So as you can see, I'm going into his head, coming out through his nose. So here we are, just whip stitching around the edge. As you can see, the sewing fabric, the sewing thread is really faint against this color, but it adds some cute definition to it. So the point of my nose is right here, and I've sewn all the way from here to the center top. And I'm just whip stitching around like so. And I just lightly pull on the thread just to help kind of cinch it down to his face. And there's no real magic or mystery to this. It's just slowly but surely going around the edges. So here he is with his whole nose sewn down, whip stitched around all the edges, and I actually went past my starting point just a little bit, just for extra security and also to help shape the way his nose looks on his face a little bit better. It would help define that point at the bottom. I think he's really cute. I think he looks really cute. And these little felt patches just make him that much more endearing, I think. So I'm just going through and hiding an end, just like I did with all of the other ones. Stick my sewing needle in my spool. There we go. And there's his little nose. Okay, let's do the super fun part, his little eyelids next. Hey everybody, so here I am. I just pinned on his eyelids, and I'm trying to pin them very similar to Brenda's original placement as possible. So in her notes, in her pattern note, she says to slant in the eyelids towards the center of the face, and it kind of gives him that furrowed brow expression that he has. If you want a different sort of expression, all you have to do is move his eyelids. I know that sounds so funny, but if if you want him to have like a sleepier look or a slightly less scowly look, you can just move his eyelids over. And I encourage you to play around with the eyelid placement until you get the expression that you're aiming for, because honestly, this way is also really cute. So just pick whichever way you want. You can put them in 2 different spots if you want. I really like this asymmetrical expression, facial expression, but let's pin this down and just see how this looks. So it's more or less scowly looking, but I think that I want to stick with the original lion-y look that she had for him. But like I said, I really encourage you playing around with his facial expressions because he's just so cute, and it's one way to make your lion distinctive, you know? Okay, so here I am with my sewing thread. I'm using the same black sewing thread that I used for his nose, and his eye, like sewing on his buttons too. So I think what I'm gonna do is start down in this bottom corner here. Oop. Oh, these threads get stuck on his little ears all the time. Okay. And as you can see, there's just a little bit of like felt fluff right here. And when we're all done, I can go back and clean that up with a pair of even finer scissors than the ones I have here. And I also forgot to trim the end after my knot in the thread, which was just so super of me. So I'm gonna do that right now before I get any further. There we go. Give that a little yank. So here I am, I'm just whip stitching around the top edge of this eyelid. And just like your other seam, so I'm just for the sake of ease, I'm gonna take this one out because it's kind of in the way right now while I'm sewing in this one. And I do want to actually leave in this pin as long as possible, just to make sure that this stays exactly in the place that I want it. Because like I said before, his depending on how much his eyelid is leaning, it really does affect the way his facial expression looks. So here I am. And you can do the same thing with, like I said before, if you don't want to use buttons for his eyes and you maybe want to use felts instead, for a young child who shouldn't be playing with having any toys around with buttons on them, you can whip stitch down the felted eyes the same way as we're doing this. So I'm going to take out the pin next, because it's actually now getting in my way. Okay, there we go. And use my finger to hold down his eyelid in place. Now it's super normal for your, for felted fabric to have fluffy edges when you cut it. Just like kind of random fibers escaping. I didn't felt this like repeatedly, so I probably could have felted this one more. I probably could have felted this swatch one more time, but honestly, it's fine for this. If I was making like a pair of slippers or like anything with a felted bottom to it, like a bag or something, I probably would have washed this another time, just because I would know that it would be hard wearing. But because these are low impact, this is a low impact area, I didn't think that last wash was necessary. But if you want to do it, by all means, wash it more than once to get it as felted as you'd like it to be. That swatch was the perfect size for all of these little pieces of fabric. So she gave just like a little bit of extra space on all sides, so cutting it out was really easy. And I wasn't worried that I was gonna rent that my little pattern templates were gonna fit on that swatch. So here we are. I have one eyelid sewn on, and I hid the tail, the end of my sewing thread, just like I did for the nose. And now I'm just gonna pin on his other eyelid and do the same thing and start sewing right here in this corner. And I'll come back when that's all done. So there we have it. A scowly looking little lion. I love him so much. Okay, so now that we've finished that, we're gonna move on to the embroidery. So his face embroidery. So that's gonna be his little mouth and his whiskers. So stay tuned for that. Thanks.